On May 3rd, 1995, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a consortium of Jewish organizations signed an agreement over the posthumous baptisms of Holocaust victims in LDS temples. In one of the main clauses of this 1995 Mormon-Jewish agreement, the LDS Church promised to issue a directive to all officials and members of the church to discontinue any future baptisms of deceased Jews unless they were direct ancestors of living members of the LDS Church, or the church had written approval of all living members of the deceased's immediate family. The agreement also emphasizes that lists of identifiable Jewish Holocaust victims should not be used for posthumous baptisms. Now, before we talk more about LDS Jewish baptisms for the dead, and for those who are not familiar with this concept of posthumous baptism, let's bring you up to speed from an ex-Mormon perspective.
This is what it means to baptize the dead in the Mormon faith. Every time I talk about baptism for the dead, people get so confused. And so in honor of spooky season, I make a video really thoroughly explaining what it means to baptize the dead. And yes, as weird as Mormons are, baptisms for the dead is not exhuming a body, placing it in a font, and baptizing it. So the fact that they named it baptisms for the dead, I think that conclusion is a little on them. Mormons believe that you have to be a baptized Mormon to get into heaven. So if you're baptized as a Catholic, Baptist, non-denominational Christian, doesn't count. You have to be baptized as a Mormon. But this creates a sticky situation because if you don't have the opportunity to be baptized as a Mormon on earth, you won't be able to go to heaven. So Mormons believe everyone has a soul or a spirit inside their bodies. And the spirit is the thing that needs to be Mormon. So if someone dies without having the opportunity to be baptized as a Mormon, they will baptize someone in your place by proxy. So if one of my ancestors died and never was baptized as a Mormon, I would get their name and their birth date and their death date on a little card, and I would take it to a Mormon temple and give it to them. I would go into the baptismal font, and they would recite a baptismal prayer. And they would say, I baptize Alyssa for and in behalf of relative name. So baptism for the dead, basically you are taking the place of the soul of the person who's passed away. Common questions. Is there a list so that Mormons don't baptize me? No, they baptize everyone. This is some non-consensual baptisming. However, they think it's consensual because in their belief, the person or soul on the other side of death gets to choose if they want to accept it or not. If I get baptized for my relative, then in the afterlife, my relative gets to say, sure thing, I'll be Mormon so that I can go to heaven, I accept. Or, no, I want to go to the celestial kingdom or whatever, I don't accept. So Mormons think it's okay to do things like baptizing Jews who died in the Holocaust because in their minds, the baptism, they get to choose if they're going to accept it. Even though obviously to most people outside of the church, they view this as really inappropriate that you would baptize the names of Jews who have passed away, they still choose to go forward with it. They believe that the people on the other end of the transaction get to accept if they accept it or not. From what I also understand, usually the church waits till you've been dead at least 100 years before they will baptize you. No one is going to care that much if your name gets added to this list of people to be baptized, because in 100 years, anyone who cared enough to make a fuss is also going to be dead. Just know that 100 years from now, the Mormons are going to make sure that your soul is baptized and they've got you covered.
Yes, indeed, the Mormons are going to have you covered. Now, here's a brief summary of this issue from an LDS perspective.
Does the church perform baptisms for Jewish Holocaust victims? No, it's against current church policy. But back in 1990, 9 members of the church submitted around 380,000 names of Jewish Holocaust victims to the temple, where they were posthumously baptized. So the next year, in 1991, Ezra Taft Benson established a policy prohibiting posthumous baptism for Jewish Holocaust victims. Following this, church leaders met with leaders of the Jewish community and established further policies and agreements to ensure names of Holocaust victims were not submitted to temples. But then, about 10 years later, researcher and past life therapist Helen Radkey released a report accusing the church of not honoring its agreement. After an investigation, the church and the American Gathering of Holocaust Survivors released a joint statement saying that the issue had been resolved. But has the church ever officially apologized for this? And was Anne Frank really posthumously baptized 9 times?
And the answer to that Anne Frank question is yes, she's been posthumously baptized many times. Oh, and I'm D-Bays with the Mormon News Roundup, and yes, that's talent on loan from Kolob. Some of the information in today's video came from researcher Helen Radkey. She's a former Mormon who left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the mid-1970s and was excommunicated after publicly criticizing the church's posthumous baptism practices. But going back to that previous video from Mormoner, it was kind of deceptive. Let me play another video which kind of fact-checks it.
You believe that the folks at Codge are really going to respect the Jewish Holocaust victims, celebrities, or anyone else? I sure don't, because the Codge leadership thinks that they need to redeem 69 billion people. They really, really believe this nonsense, and that's why they're going to keep doing it. And they're not going to stop baptizing Jewish Holocaust victims or dead relatives of U.S. presidents or millions upon millions of other ordinary people not related to any Mormon, like World War I soldiers, Ellis Island immigrants, or anyone else until the rest of the world tells them to stop. It is insensitive and just plain rude.
He's right, and as I'll show in this video, the church is going to keep doing it. LDS Church directives to cease posthumous baptisms of deceased Jews have either been deliberately ignored or carelessly overlooked by many Latter-day Saints. Since May of 1995, a swelling army of LDS Church members have inundated the LDS temple system with names of Jewish Holocaust victims and other Jews they are not directly related to. When it was discovered that individual Mormons continued to posthumously baptize Jews against the direct ancestor provision of the agreement, the LDS Church reneged on the agreement by declaring to Jewish representatives that it is the church's policy to allow members of their faith to baptize any relative, no matter how distant.
Some individuals had submitted the name of Nobel Peace Prize winner and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel as ready for a posthumous proxy baptism. Now, there's a couple of problems with this. One is, the dude doesn't want to be baptized as a Mormon. Two, he's not dead. The names of Wiesel's father, who perished in the Holocaust, and his maternal grandfather have also been proposed for proxy baptism. This is according to Radkey. There was an agreement struck by Mormon elders and some Jewish groups that they would stop doing this. Because apparently it's really annoying if your parents have died in the Holocaust because they were Jewish, to then have somebody sprinkle Mormon dust on them or whatever they do. I don't know what they do. It appears that after that, this woman Radkey found that the church was not adhering to that deal. And so in 2010, they made another deal. Yeah, I don't know if the Jews had to trade like Sandy Koufax to the Mormons in consideration for future Mormons. If you stop baptizing Jews posthumously. Another deal resulted in the promise by Mormon Church to at least prevent inappropriate proxy baptism requests for Holocaust victims, although not all Jews. These Mormons, they drive a hard bargain.
Mormons certainly do drive a hard bargain. Now, the number of Jews known to have been subjected to LDS proxy ordinances against the terms of the 1995 agreement is large scale. Since the origination of the agreement, the names of many tens of thousands and likely hundreds of thousands of identifiable Jews have appeared in the LDS Church's current database of posthumous ordinances. That database is called the International Genealogical Index, or IGI. The IGI is a vast database maintained by the Mormon Church to catalog genealogical records from around the world. It is used to identify deceased individuals who may be eligible for proxy baptisms, a key practice in LDS theology that aims to offer salvation to the dead. Church members often perform proxy baptisms in temples using the name sources from the IGI, believing this allows those who have passed to accept or decline the ordinances in the afterlife. And therein lies the big problem here. Mormon theology stipulates that unless these Holocaust victims are baptized for the dead, they can't go to heaven.
There was a problem for a while with the descendants of the family members of Holocaust victims being upset they were being baptized posthumously as members of the church, right? The proxy ordinances were being done for them. Rightly so, they were upset by that. And so the church said they would stop doing it. But that's actually quite interesting that the church said they would stop, because what the church is then saying is, because of this elitist view that John's just put out, which is absolutely explicit almost within Mormon teachers, but certainly implicit, they've said, right, well, the 6 million Jews that died as a result of the Holocaust, they just, I guess, aren't getting eternal salvation. That is then the Mormon view, because they said, well, in order to appease the sensitivities of those still alive, those who are understandably upset, we will not allow those people to be posthumously baptized. But what that is saying within Mormon doctrine is just those people are going to the celestial kingdom. And as a believing member, I'd love, if you're watching this, to put in the comments how you would balance that.
Well, I was just going to say, we did our episode with Russell Nelson's Miracle Stories, and RFM was on there, and he had a quote from, I think, Russell Nelson's first autobiography that he read, where he literally talks about how Russell Nelson goes to the Holocaust site, and he says something along the lines of, these are a lot of people we could baptize to save, you know? And so there is this view within Mormonism that, yeah, we got to clean up the messes of all these other religions.
Now, in the IGI, you'll find thousands of Jews whose names were taken from synagogue lists from around the world, rabbinical lines, and a vast array of Jewish notables. Included among these are prime ministers of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir, Yitzhak Rabin, and Menachem Begin. The name of famed Jewish Holocaust survivor and Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal, who died in Vienna, Austria in September 2005, ended up in the IGI shortly thereafter.
You got a story on today about Mormons converting dead Jews. Strangely, this is controversial. Tell us more.
It's controversial, and it's actually been going on for quite a while, despite a couple decades of negotiations between Jewish and Mormon leaders to kind of prevent it from happening. The Church of Latter-day Saints apologized recently because they posthumously baptized Simon Wiesenthal's parents.
Dope!
So yeah, he's
That's the wrong dude.
yeah,
wrong
famous
family.
Nazi hunter. You can't go there.
Yeah.
So they said they were sorry. They have this really big registry.
Do they unbaptize as by way of making? So they just sort of like,
it
oops, our
cannot
bad.
be undone. Yes.
So here's my question here. On the one hand, I totally get why this is wildly offensive. On the other, as a Jew, like, we don't believe that these baptisms mean anything. Like, the Jewish faith doesn't recognize a posthumous Mormon baptism as having any effect on the soul of a Jew or anybody else.
Right.
That's right.
I think it's
it's kinda like just
incendiary and
knock yourself
provocative
out.
and obnoxious, but on the other hand, like, who really cares?
I think the operative
Apparently the
word here is
Wiesenthal family.
baptism. I think Jews sort of for a very long time were persecuted for their beliefs in the Holocaust. They were murdered for them. So I think the idea of, be baptized, convert to Christianity or die, that's sort of the mantra for over centuries. So I think Jews are really upset
We're
by the word
highly
baptism.
sensitized to
Oh yeah.
I think understandably in this particular.
I get it.
The LDS Church continues to posthumously baptize significant numbers of Jewish Holocaust victims not related to Mormons. Of course, this is against the 1995 agreement, and some Latter-day Saints willfully persist in submitting lists of names of Jews who died in death camps. Most of these temple submissions have been taken from Holocaust lists. Jewish Holocaust names regularly appear in the IGI. The death camps these Jews died in, such as Auschwitz or Sobibor, are very often shown in their IGI entries. As a senseless gesture, the Church frequently rebaptizes Dutch Jewish Holocaust victims, whose previously baptized names were once removed from the IGI as a condition of the 1995 agreement. The simple fact of the matter here is that the names of so many thousands of Jews who died in the Holocaust could not all be linked to living Mormons. For instance, some of these Holocaust victims murdered as young children or teenagers had no direct descendants. Their bloodlines were wiped off the face of the earth. Yet Latter-day Saint faithful submit many of these names anyway, falsely claiming descendancy. Of course, Anne Frank, who died very young with no descendants, is a perfect example of that.
Anne Frank, pictured above the famous diarist. She wrote those famous diaries, and she was one of the most famous Jewish victims of the Holocaust. Her name has been submitted so many times and so many records have been made for her in the Mormon database that she has been baptized at least 10 times into the Mormon Church. Disrespectful? Sure, her and her family would prefer to remain Jewish. And here is the record for Anne Frank. In Family Search, her baptism was completed February 18, 2012, Dominican Republic Temple. Confirmation completed on the same day.
And it's not just Jewish Holocaust victims who've been baptized for the dead. Even those who ruthlessly exterminated them have received proxy ordinances in the afterlife.
Have you ever pondered the fate of notorious figures, such as Adolf Hitler, in the afterlife? A fascinating topic indeed, especially when examined through the lens of various religious beliefs. In the realm of Mormonism, a concept known as general salvation ensures that nearly all individuals, regardless of their earthly deeds, have a chance for heavenly glory. This includes figures as infamous as Adolf Hitler. Now let's delve deeper into this unique doctrine. On the 10th of December in 1993, Hitler underwent a process referred to as posthumous baptism, endowment, and sealing to his parents. This event took place in the London, England temple. But what exactly does this mean? Posthumous baptism, or baptism for the dead, is a ritual where living individuals are baptized in the place of deceased ones. This practice is based on the belief that baptism is a necessary step for salvation, and thus should be available to all, regardless of their state in life or death. Endowment, on the other hand, is a sacred ordinance that provides individuals with divine power and blessings from God. This ritual involves a series of symbolic instructions, covenants, and promises that are believed to guide individuals towards eternal life. Sealing, the final step, refers to the eternal binding of individuals or families. In Hitler's case, he was sealed to his parents, signifying an eternal family bond that extends beyond mortal life. Through these practices, Hitler was granted the opportunity for heavenly glory according to Mormon beliefs. It's important to note that in Mormon doctrine, individuals like Hitler are not condemned to eternal damnation. They are not considered sons of perdition. Being so wicked, they are cast into outer darkness. In summary, the Mormon faith's unique processes of posthumous baptism, endowment, and sealing offer an intriguing perspective on the afterlife of notorious figures. It emphasizes the belief in the availability of salvation for all, even those with a history of heinous deeds. This doctrine certainly provides food for thought, challenging conventional views of the afterlife and eternal judgment. So next time you find yourself pondering the fate of infamous figures in the afterlife, remember the unique perspective offered by the Mormon faith. It might just provide a new angle to your contemplations.
What makes these circumstances even more remarkable, as cartloads of names of Jews, especially Jewish Holocaust victims, have been processed post-1995 through LDS temples, is that the LDS Church has gone through a series of procedures to ensure that online ordinance details are completely off limits to non-Mormons. Only an accredited Latter-day Saint with a special user login can access ordinance data in the online IGI in order to determine which LDS rituals have been done for a dead person. So basically, the Church made an agreement with Jews to stop proxy baptisms, but then attempted to eliminate all non-LDS monitoring of ongoing ordinance activity. And what's even more troubling is that Nemo the Mormon points out that there was some complicity between Latter-day Saints and the Nazis in the Holocaust's extermination.
Assured by their church leaders that there was no conflict in being a good Mormon and a good citizen of the Nazi state, German Mormons dutifully served in the Nazi Labor Corps and the German military. Other Latter-day Saints enthusiastically donned the brown shirts of Hitler's Sturmabteilung, an organization that bashed heads in the streets and vandalized Jewish businesses. Some joined for more benign reasons, such as the Hamburg congregation who enjoyed playing in the local SA band. Other Mormons obtained membership in Hitler's elite group of personal guards, the black-shirted Schutzstaffel, an organization that expanded to play a leading role in the Holocaust. One Hamburg member, infamous among his fellow congregants for having killed one of Hitler's political opponents in a street fight, enlisted in the Totenkopfverbände, the Death's Head SS brigades that ran the extermination camps. Another Mormon who appeared in an early scholarly article as an expert mechanic who installed specialized machinery at Auschwitz. In the parlance of Nazi Germany, that is a euphemism for someone who set up gas chambers and crematoria.
A continuing stipulation of the 1995 agreement specifies that the LDS Church would remove from the IGI the names of all deceased Jews, who can be identified as Jews if they are found to be improperly included in the IGI. The removal of Jewish Holocaust listings from the IGI has been inconsistent. After outside complaints, some entries vanish, but similar entries remain. New listings for Jewish Holocaust victims frequently appear in the IGI, as though names go in and out of that database through an unstoppable revolving door. Even without ordinance access, it is evident that the ever-increasing volume of obvious Jewish Holocaust listings in the IGI is substantial. According to a key clause in the agreement, the LDS Church should have taken measures to correct LDS Church members known to have intentionally submitted names of Jews they are unrelated to into the LDS temple system. As years roll by, however, Jewish Holocaust names continue to steadily increase in the IGI. Even with online ordinance information hidden from the public and the removal of some Holocaust listings, the LDS Church cannot hide the visible magnitude of Jewish Holocaust listings in its online IGI.
When I found out that the Mormons are baptizing the Jewish Holocaust survivors, one word, it was shocked. Second word, how can they do it? Third was, why do they do it? Because it was, in a way, an unbelievable experience for me to find out that somebody can baptize another person after the person died. I am a Jew. I was born as a Jew. 6 million my brothers and my friends and my family were killed because they were Jews. So I wanted them to be Jews. I wanted them to remain Jews. And I didn't want anybody later on, 100, 200 years from now, to tell me that my parents were not Jewish because somewhere in the archives in the Mormon church, there is my father's name, my mother's name is listed as a Gentile, as a Mormon person. This was to me painful.
Let's hear from an LDS Church spokesperson who tries to defend the church's actions in this complete debacle.
We haven't wanted as a church to just, assert our First Amendment right and say, well, this is what we believe, this is our doctrine, the devil may care. That isn't our intent at all. That's why in 1995 we entered into an arrangement with them. At that time, we, in a sense, took out of our records those Holocaust survivors or Holocaust victims for whom we had performed temple work. We have been actually very diligent since in not sending to our temples Jewish names unless they were sent by Jewish members of our church who have sent in the names of their own relatives.
As Helen Radkey and others have pointed out, those safeguards have proved ineffective, and many Holocaust victims' names have appeared in the IGI and in the temple proxy baptism system.
Despite the controversy, the Mormon effort to baptize the world's dead continues, and they have mobilized an army of volunteers around the world to root out the names of people they believe might still be saved.
There is literally a mountain of names in one extraordinary structure outside of Salt Lake City, and indestructible. I am told that even a direct hit by an atomic bomb, something like an asteroid collision, would have to occur to wipe it out.
Of the 7 billion names of the dead which have ever been recorded, approximately 2 billion have already been collected by Mormon volunteers.
Despite ordinance data restrictions, many thousands of copies of post-1995 ordinance records for Jewish Holocaust victims, including several thousand entries for Dutch Jews who died in Auschwitz and Sobibor, have been collected. Jewish Holocaust victims from the Netherlands are primary targets for some Latter-day Saint submitters. Evidence has been found that Mormons are still baptizing Dutch Jewish Holocaust victims well after 1995.
The Mormon Church is facing criticism for baptizing dead people now because Mitt Romney is Mormon. It's getting political. Holocaust survivor and Nobel Peace Prize winner Elie Wiesel wants Romney to denounce the baptisms of Jews, and in particular, a recent controversy surrounding Holocaust victims. The Huffington Post revealed that the names of Wiesel's relatives were also added to a list as quote-unquote ready for baptism by proxy. I spoke with Professor Wiesel a short time ago and started by asking him what he would say to Mitt Romney.
As for Mitt Romney, I have respect for him. I don't involve myself in politics. I am neither for Democrats nor for Republicans. This man is running for the highest office probably in the world. And that man has responsibilities, not only of what's happening here in America politically, but also what is happening in other areas. When such a lie could be distorted and propagated.
Why is it important for you to bring Mitt Romney into this? Because you well know, especially in a political season, that people will say you are either intentionally or unintentionally, by bringing Governor Romney into this, politicizing a very sensitive religious issue.
Well, because I am a Jew and Romney is a Mormon. If nothing is wrong for a Mormon to come and say we made a mistake and we shall not do it again. I'm not saying that he personally was involved in all that. Maybe he didn't even know what was happening, but now he does. Now the whole country speaks about it. So why not saying, look, I learned it, it's not my field. I'm religious and I'm a Mormon and I respect my religion. And by the way, I respect his religion too. But when it comes to this, the Holocaust memory is something that we have been working for since the end of the war. That is our obsession now. It's our ideal now. not to allow the world to forget what happened.
The Mormon Church has responded, Professor, telling the Salt Lake Tribune the following in a statement, that the Church's policy is that members can request these baptisms only for their own ancestors. Proxy baptisms of Holocaust victims are strictly prohibited, and they go on to say that in this case, in your case, the Wiesel family names were not submitted for baptism, but simply entered into a genealogical database. Our system would have rejected those names had they been submitted, and that's from a church spokesman. So are you satisfied with that explanation from the church?
Well, it's for them to say. I am not satisfied with the idea that some Jews, dead Jews, could be converted no matter how. Again, in the Jewish religion, we don't have that. When a man or a person, when a woman is dead, leave him alone, leave him in peace.
In addition to the copies of thousands of Dutch Holocaust Ordinance entries, post-1995 Ordinance copies have been obtained for Jewish Holocaust victims from other countries, including Italy, Poland, Germany, France, Austria, Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Greece, Russia, Ukraine, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, and Bulgaria. The Italian listings alone include over 700 entries for Jews from Rome, Italy, who perished in the gas chambers of Auschwitz in October 1943. Most of these Roman Jews were posthumously baptized in May 1999, and their names submitted into the Latter-day Saint temple system from a Holocaust list.
How much did it cost to build this?
A lot.
You won't say how much, but it doesn't look like any expense was spared. The chambers are striking. We saw sealing rooms where weddings take place, an instruction room with a mural depicting Earth as Mormons believe just after creation, and the pristine celestial room, the most sacred space inside, for reflection and meditation, complete with crystal chandeliers. This is the biggest room you'll find in the temple. There's no large sanctuary.
The purpose of the temple is not for a big meeting. We have other chapels and throughout the church and throughout the world, assembly halls and meeting halls. And when we come to the temple, this is more for private and individual communion.
While we were given an extensive tour, the church denied our request to record it and instead provided these pictures. I asked Walker if that doesn't play into perceptions, right or wrong, that the church is secretive.
It's not about secret, it's about sacred. And we feel that it's a very sacred and a special place, and therefore is reserved for those worship functions and those ordinances that take place in the temple. Is not about secret.
Come on in, out of the way.
But once the temple closes its doors to the public next month, not even all Mormons will be allowed in.
Worshippers are supposed to wear white when they come in here on a normal basis. During these visits, we have to wear foot coverings so we don't mess up the carpets. Now, once this place is dedicated, you cannot come past this front desk, what's called the recommend desk, unless you have a recommendation from your local Mormon church leader.
Inside, the ornate baptismal font resting on 12 oxen, symbolizing the 12 tribes of Israel. But the font also symbolizes controversy for the LDS Church. Here, they'll perform hundreds of posthumous baptisms, specifically for Mormons' ancestors who were not of the faith, an invitation to accept Mormonism as an avenue into heaven. But some Mormons have used the church's genealogy database to baptize others who are not Mormon ancestors, like murdered Jewish reporter Daniel Pearl and Holocaust victims like Anne Frank, a practice that has outraged Jewish leaders.
The critics say that this speaks of a theological arrogance and intolerance, that you believe your faith is the only avenue in which to get into heaven. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say to that, Jesus didn't say that this is just for people of a particular persuasion. Jesus taught it's necessary to be baptized to enter the kingdom of heaven.
Walker says there's no desire to offend anyone. He says the church views this as a loving, kind gesture, but is cracking down on those who violate their policy.
When I asked him how he would respond to those who say the damage is done, that too many people have already been offended by posthumous baptisms, Elder Walker said, maybe we didn't do some things as well as we should have. He said we would tell them we're sorry, but we live by our word when we say we'll do something about it.
And there you have it, folks. The deeply complex and contentious saga of the LDS Church and its posthumous baptisms of Jewish Holocaust victims. What began as a misguided effort to honor the dead has become a source of significant strain between the Mormon Church and Jewish communities worldwide. The 1995 agreement was supposed to put an end to this controversy, but the persistence of violations, intentional or otherwise, raises serious questions about accountability, oversight, and respect for interfaith agreements. This issue is more than just a theological or administrative of disagreement. It touches the very core of cultural sensitivity, historical trauma, and ethical responsibility. As we've seen, the ongoing inclusion of Holocaust victims' names in the LDS Church's genealogical databases, despite pledges to the contrary, underscores the challenge of managing a decentralized religious community. But it also raises an important conversation about the intersection of religious practices and broader human rights. So what do you think? Should the LDS Church be doing more to enforce its agreement with Jewish organizations? Is there a path forward to repair the damage and restore trust? Or does this controversy highlight a deeper systemic issue within the Mormon Church itself? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below or reach out to us on social media. As always, thank you so much for tuning into the Mormon News Roundup, where we tackle the hard-hitting topics others won't touch. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode to keep the conversation going. Always think celestial, and remember, no unhallowed hand can stop this podcast from progressing.